There's only one totally tax-free place left in Europe, and it's a paradise for introverts. Today, I'm going to tell you where you can move and eliminate practically every tax from your life. I'm not talking about Monaco, which while it has zero income tax, actually does have a corporate tax. I'm not talking about Malta or Cyprus or Ireland with their friendly non-dom programs, or Switzerland with a lump sum program, or Georgia with its territorial tax. I'm talking about absolute zero tax, basically the absence of any kind of tax at all. There's one place in Europe that has it, and it's a tiny island between England and France called Sark. Sark is one of the Channel Islands. You might have heard of the larger islands like Jersey, for example, which has a program where you pay a six-figure, basically lump sum tax, and you have the access to live in Jersey. Guernsey is one of the other ones. The Beatles moved to the Channel Islands at one point, but you probably never heard of Sark. Victor Hugo said that the Channel Islands were pieces of France that fell off into the sea and were gathered up by England. And so you've got a little bit of French culture there, they say, but you've got this British system where you can get tax advantages while also being able to work towards a pretty good passport. Let me tell you how it works. But before I do that, you should know Sark has about 500 people. At its peak, there are about 1,000 people. There's no airport. You get there by ferry from one of the larger Channel Islands. You're not allowed to have a car on the island. This is, again, a paradise for anyone who just wants to be left alone. And when you say you're going to the supermarket, you're going to the supermarket. This is a place where you're somewhat stepping back in time and you're just going to be left alone. Now, the good news is, what people complain about the British Isles is the weather. This is actually one of the sunniest parts of the British Isles, so you've got a bit better weather. It gets up in the mid-20s Celsius in the summer, so somewhere in the 70s, low 70s perhaps. And so you can actually even work towards a version of UK citizenship if you spend as little as 5 years in Sark. Here's the deal. Income tax, none. Capital gains tax, none. Inheritance tax, none. Corporate income tax, there's actually no corporations that actually are formed on Sark. And so you can set up your company somewhere else. If that company is tax-free, and so the actual corporate income tax at the local level, wherever it is, whether it's somewhere nearby, if you set up in Jersey, if you set up in the Isle of Man, if you set up somewhere further afield like a Hong Kong, Panama, there aren't any special rules like CFC rules in Sark that force you to pay tax. And even if there were, there's no kind of tax. So they have no corporate income tax. That's also zero. But you have to bring your own company with you. Value-added tax, VAT, zero. Sales tax, zero. Wealth tax, zero. The only tax that is levied on people who live in Sark is a tax that is based on the property that you occupy, not its value. So that could range between 2,000 to 7,000 pounds, give or take, every year. So call it less than 10,000 US dollars if you're living in the nicest accommodations. The average person's paying between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds. There's also, and this is very charming, a tax on horses and bicycles. So that's what you got. You're riding around on your horse, you're riding around on your bicycle. You have to fill out an annual tax return. It's basically one page, and then you sign in the back. So Nomad Capitalist Live later this year. We've got the former president of Estonia who's going to be speaking. He did two things. They oversaw the e-residence program, and they were part of the transition to basically having taxes on a postcard. And so just like Estonia did that, Sark has one-page form you've got to file and you've got to fill out every year. And so from Sark's perspective, if you have a home available to you, if you have a residence on the island, you are a tax resident. They're happy to give that to you because they don't have any tax. They just make sure they collect their several thousand pounds a year because you have that accommodation available to you. Now, what you'll see in many countries around the world is when you're trying to leave their high tax country, one of the criteria could be, however it's worded, do you have accommodation available to you? And that's one thing that people sometimes struggle with when they want to leave their country. They own a house, but they want to keep it available for their use when they go back. That can, in many countries, be a problem that ties them to the tax system. They can't get out of, let's say, Australia or the UK or somewhere else, or at least it works against them as a strike towards, how many strikes you can get for them to not be able to leave their high tax country. And so obviously on the other hand, Sark is different, where a high tax country wants to keep you as a tax resident. Sark is, okay, we're happy to have you as one. Pay us this fee for a home that you'd have available to you. And even if you wanted to spend your time traveling around the region. So Sark is part of the Channel Islands. If you wanted to go and spend some time in the UK, obviously there's limits on how much time, depending on how many connections you have to the UK, how much time you can spend there before you become a taxpayer there. But if you did your tax planning in the UK, also part of the Common Travel Agreement, which benefits citizens, not necessarily just residents, but you could spend some time in Ireland. How do you make sure you're not a taxpayer in Ireland? So Sark allows you to be pretty flexible in terms of your tax residence. And if you want to spend time in other parts of the nearby world, you can do that. Now, here's the issue. You are going to want to spend some certain amount of time in Sark, and that could differ for every person, because you don't necessarily want to spend more time in some other country, particularly in certain countries like in continental Europe. If you just spend a couple days a year in Sark, you pay their little tax on the residence, but then you're spending 4 months somewhere else. Maybe if you buy a car, if you buy a home in another country, they could perhaps drag you into the tax net. So there's so many different permutations we could go into. I'm not giving you tax advice. I'm just kind of giving you things to think about. From Sark's perspective, there's no tax on their island. They're happy to give you tax residence if you have accommodation available to you. That's a good thing to have in Sark, a bad thing to have in many cases if you're leaving a high tax country, accommodation available to you. But what you want to make sure is if you make Sark your tax residence, that you are using that to the same standard the other countries you might be spending time in are going to accept that you're a tax resident of Sark and not try and basically overrule that in their own country by saying, well, but you're actually here. You can't just go and rent a house in Sark, spend 1 day a year there, and then go and live, 9 months in Canada or mainland UK and be like, well, I have this thing in Sark. Sark's happy to see you as a tax resident, but somebody else might suck you into their system as well. So this is the kind of thing we talk to clients about is, let's plan out year. Where does it look like? Where do you have to be? Sometimes, our tax guys come in and say, yeah, that's too long for you to be in that particular country. You need to pull back on that. But the bottom line is Sark is happy to have you. They're happy to have you as a tax resident. And if you plan the rest of your affairs, then you can use it as a base, a 500 to 1,000 person base to have as your tax resident. And then whenever you decide to get rid of your home on the island, that's when you cease to be a tax resident. Now, how do you move in? If you're a citizen of the UK or of Ireland, which is also part of the CTA, in certain cases, Commonwealth citizens, you simply go there, you declare your intention, you have the right of abode. Hello, here I am. I want to be a resident of Sark. If you're American, if you're from the EU, obviously now that the UK is no longer in the European Union, unless you have rights to settlement from before Brexit. If you're Canadian, if you're from anywhere else in the world, you have to make an investment to get residence in Sark, and it's 200,000 British pounds. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to pay that much less than that as a lump sum every year to live in Jersey. You could live, if we're talking about other parts of the British system, you could live in Gibraltar and you could pay quite a bit less than that, but that's a tax you're going to pay every year. So if you're living in these other parts of the Channel Islands and other parts of the UK system, you may not have to make an investment in some cases, but you're going to have an ongoing tax. Sark has no tax, but if you don't have the right to live there, it's 200,000 pounds into a business that you must manage. This can be, digital export. It can be a lot of different things. 200,000 pounds goes into the business. You do have to hire 2 Sark residents. Now, there's been a movement among some more libertarian folks to move to Sark in recent years, and so they may have their own businesses. It's possible somebody they know or somebody in their family wants to be an employee. You could theoretically bring people, have somebody who wants to pay zero tax come with you. Maybe you find people in the UK or Ireland. They want to move somewhere like Sark and work for you. And then you need to buy or rent a home on the island. So obviously a more straightforward process if you're from the UK, if you're from Ireland. Otherwise, you're looking at a low 6-figure investment, hiring a few people, doing some business, keeping that up. And whatever process you go through, the Lord of Sark, that's a title you could aspire to, don't you think? The Lord of Sark has to approve the application. They've got a small, I guess, the parliament now that they get together and approve the application. So you can imagine on an island of this size, it is something that they go through. They do each and every one. After 5 years, there is kind of a variation, a Channel Islands version of the British passport, which you can use. Pretty good passport you can get if you're actually spending your time there. You have to spend 183 days on the island. There's some ways potentially you could reduce that. And what you have to make sure you're doing is, even if you are spending some time, in the UK, in Ireland, that can't be a place where you have a home. So this is not, hey, I'm from London and I'm going to keep my home and I'm going to keep all my stuff there, but I'm going to come and live in Sark. You can do some traveling throughout the area, but you really need to be based in Sark for more than half the year if you want to aspire to get that passport. Other than that, this is a very libertarian place in terms of how employment operates, very laissez-faire. Again, in terms of how companies operate, they don't have that, so it's just bring your own company. You can get permanent establishment for your company. You can take advantage of all the tax benefits on Sark. So if you're running some kind of business, if you have some kind of consulting income, certain kinds of passive income, you can essentially come. Obviously, there may be kind of certain incomes that you have from overseas that may be taxed at the source, but whatever income you have, Sark is not going to add anything onto it. And so some people have looked at the very far afield, Pitcairn Island. I mean, that's way far away. There's one ship that comes in every, I don't even remember how often. I mean, you're really isolated down there. In Sark, you've got Guernsey nearby, Jersey nearby. You can take a boat pretty easily. I mean, those airports are a couple 100 miles from anywhere in the UK, anywhere in Ireland, anywhere in France. If nothing else, you could charter a plane. I think there certainly are, planes that go to Jersey and Guernsey from London all the time. So easy enough to get to, easy enough to get out and do shopping, easy enough to go out and see people. Now, if you're looking for a tax-friendly place to live where you don't ride your horse around, then there are dozens of countries that we have helped our clients move to. You may have heard of them, unlike Sark, but you may not know that they're tax-friendly. There are countries in Europe that, even though their headline tax rates are very high, you can go and avail of special lump sum or non-dom or exemptions or any kind of different system, territorial tax in some of the countries. There are countries around Europe you can go to. Nomad Capitalist helps our clients legally handle all their different multi-jurisdictional planning. We have tax professionals all around the world. We make sure that they work nicely together. We help you with the immigration part of it, whether it's just a residence permit, whether you also need a citizenship, especially Americans need to be considerate of that. And so how do you handle your entire affairs of leaving your country, moving your company, potentially moving your family, your employees, and getting into a system that makes much more sense financially, gives you a lot more of the freedom that Sark has? It's out there. And if Sark's not the answer, if it is, you can call us too. But if it's not the answer, go to nomadcapitalist.com and let us help you figure out the unknown unknowns that you might not have been aware of. We can help you diagnose any number of issues about how to legally reduce your tax in ways that you perhaps didn't even know were possible. Take control of your money. You don't have to move to an island with 500 people to take back control of your finances. Go to nomadcapitalist.com to learn more.